So as the blood flows through the arteries, eventually it goes through arterioles and later it goes into capillaries. And the capillaries is, once again, just a single layer of transparent tunica intima. So it's just this single layer of cells. Here's a cell right here. You can see that it's flat and thin. And then there's a blood vessel right there. Here's another cell. And then you have these pores in between the cells right there. So like these little openings between the cells. And that's where oxygen and carbon dioxide can pass through. So here in the middle diagram, we have oxygen shown with those little green circles. And as it passes through the capillaries, the blood cells, which are shown here, release the oxygen, which then goes into your cells of your body. At the same time, your cells have produced carbon dioxide, which is shown with these blue circles here. So the carbon dioxide molecules can also squeeze through the pores of the capillaries, and then they are diffused into the blood, and the veins bring them back to the heart, or back to the lungs. Well, back to the heart, which then pumps the blood to the lungs. And then here you can see again, blood is flowing through the arteries, passing through the arterioles into the capillaries, and then draining back into venules and veins. So what substances are exchanged at the capillaries? It's going to be oxygen, it's going to be nutrients like glucose and vitamins, it's going to be carbon dioxide, plus other wastes like urea. Urea is what makes up urine. And they do directly diffuse across the plasma membrane. Now at this point, the actual mechanism of these gases and other nutrients being exchanged at capillary beds, that's more of like an honors level topic. So I am going to talk about it. If you're a science nerd, please listen. But if it's not something that you care about, since it's not going to be directly quizzed on a daily quiz or on an exam, you can skip ahead roughly maybe 3 minutes towards the slide that talks about major veins. Okay, so if you're staying for this part of it, what's happening is the oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nutrients are directly diffusing across plasma membranes. You also have larger things that might be traveling in the blood, so things like maybe proteins that are needed for cells. Those can also enter the cells through the blood, but you'd have to use endocytosis or exocytosis, meaning that you'd have to actually pinch off vesicles at the cell membrane in order to allow those larger materials to get out of the capillaries and into the cells. And then also there are some capillaries that will have gaps that are not just like the small pores, but actual larger gaps. And that's where other materials can pass through. Okay, so this is what's actually happening at capillary beds. You have the oxygen leaking out of blood cells through capillary walls into tissues that are nearby. And then you have waste like carbon dioxide that is diffusing from a high concentration inside the cells through the surrounding tissue and into the capillaries where it's at a lower concentration. So it's just simple diffusion out of cells into the blood vessels. And then here you can see what that looks like a little more closely. So here you have the blood vessel, here you have the surrounding tissue, and there's going to be some direct diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide across the blood vessel walls, as well as through these clefts that are present, as well as through actual pores, so actual gaps in between one cell here that makes up the wall of the capillary and another cell here that makes up the wall. And then last of all, if you have larger materials that do need to cross this membrane, but that can't do it through one of these little intercellular clefts, then you can accomplish that through endocytosis. So endocytosis, the materials are coming in here, they're being pinched off into vesicles right there. It's labeled for you here. They're being pinched off into vesicles. They're traveling across the cells that make up the capillary walls, and then exocytosis on the other side to dump the materials into the lumen of the capillaries here. So here's the chemistry behind it. If you've taken chemistry, then you should know about gas pressure and partial pressures and things like that. So what's happening is you have high blood pressure inside the capillary as the blood enters from the arterial end of the capillary. So just imagine you have an artery here, you have an arterial here, and then the arterial feeds this capillary. And so as the blood enters the capillary, it's at high pressure because of all of the water and all of the oxygen gas that's diffused into the blood, that's being carried by the blood cells. You also have osmotic pressure that's pushing against the capillary. So osmotic pressure of gases and other materials that are dissolved into the surrounding fluids. But the pressure of the oxygen gas being carried by the blood is higher than the osmotic pressure pushing against the capillary. And so the net pressure is actually 10 milligrams of mercury directed outwards, away from the blood vessel. So that's going to force oxygen to follow that blood pressure. It's going to go out of the capillary, away from where it's in an area of high pressure, towards an area of lower pressure. So that lowers the pressure in the capillary, the gas pressure in the capillary, to the point where you now have only 17-ish millimeters of mercury pushing away, like out of the capillary, compared to the 25 millimeters of mercury of gas pressure from carbon dioxide in the surrounding tissues that are pushing on the capillary. So the net pressure is a difference of 8, right? Because the pressure pushing into the capillary is 8 milligrams mercury higher than the pressure of any remaining oxygen pushing out. So that's going to allow carbon dioxide from the surrounding tissues to go in, because you have higher gas pressure at this point outside than inside. And so now, by the time the blood in the capillary returns at the venous end into the venules, it's now got lots of dissolved carbon dioxide in there and very little oxygen in there.